200,000 men are moving south. Nothing stops them. In the autumn of 105 BC, near the small town of Arausio on the banks of the Rhone, the Roman armies pitched two separate camps. Proconsul Quintus Servilius Capio refused to take orders from Consul Gaius Marius Maximus. The aristocrat had no intention of sharing command with an upstart from an obscure family. Two camps, two commanders, one enemy. The Teutones and Cimbri hit them one at a time. First Malleus's army, then Capio's. In 2 days, Rome lost 80,000 legionaries and 40,000 auxiliaries. Plutarch would record that number without comment. It needed none. A messenger gallops into Rome on a lathered horse. The city already knows. Rumor rides faster than any courier. The Senate declares mourning. Shops close. The public games stop. A silence settles over the streets of Rome, the kind that comes only just before or just after a catastrophe. Women are forbidden to let their daughters out. Men gather under the porticos and speak in low voices. With their fingers, they trace the barbarians' route. From Arausio to the Alps, less than a 2-week march. From the Alps to Rome, another 2 weeks. But the Horde doesn't cross the Alps. It turns west into Gaul. Nobody understands why. This is the first riddle of a war Rome has not yet learned how to read. In Rome, the panic takes on shape and weight. Patricians bury their gold in country villas. Senators invent state business that happens to be far from the city. The urban praetor sets night watches along the walls. Walls that hadn't held off an enemy in 200 years. Not since the Gallic invasion. Rome burned then. Few came through it. Everyone remembers. Then a name goes around the forum. A name the senators force out through clenched teeth. Gaius Marius. He's no patrician. Born in Arpinum, son of a small landowner. He never got the Greek education the aristocrats parade around. His Latin is rough. His manners, those of a soldier. Plutarch writes that Marius did not know Greek and thought it beneath him to use the language for serious matters. In Rome, where reciting Homer from memory is the mark of good breeding, that ought to be a death sentence. But Marius is already a 2-time consul. He broke Jugurtha in Africa, while other commanders had been treading water for years. The army worships him. The soldiers call him the third founder of Rome, after Romulus and Camillus. The Senate grinds its teeth and stays quiet because there is no other choice. In 104 BC, while the Teutonic horde still wanders through Gaul, in no hurry to come south, Gaius Marius is elected consul for the 3rd time. The law forbids holding the office 2 years running and forbids a repeat at all without a 10-year gap. Marius is consul for the 2nd year in a row and the 3rd time in his career. The Senate votes yes. They despise this man, and they have just handed him the Republic. Marius takes command of what's left of the army. He looks it over. The legions are demoralized. Defeat has shattered discipline. The officers have gotten used to a baggage train dragging behind the army like a dog's tail. Endless carts of provisions, slaves, merchants, prostitutes, moneylenders. The whole mass crawls slower than a turtle and devours half the army's fighting power. Marius looks at this arrangement and does what nobody expects. He starts recruiting from scratch on principles that had never existed before. The old law requires a legionary to own property, land, livestock, a house. A property owner defends what's his. That's how Rome had fought for 400 years. Marius scraps the property qualification. He throws enlistment open to every man of military age, proletarians included. Men with no land, no livestock, nothing at all. Men who own their own bodies and a hunger to change their fate and not much else. They come by the thousand. Rome has never seen an army like this. These aren't citizens defending the fields they were born on. These are men with nothing to lose. They don't sign up for an idea. They don't sign up for the Republic. They sign up for pay, for plunder, for the chance to walk home with coin in their pocket. Marius knows it. and he builds everything on that knowledge. The first day in camp destroys everything a recruit thought military service was. Reveille before dawn, a run in full kit. Trenches to dig, another run. A march of 20 Roman miles under a full pack. Then build the camp, and it repeats every single day. No exceptions, no allowance for sickness, no deference to a good name. The senator's son stands in the same rank as a landless peasant out of Samnium. In Marius's camp, that's the only equality he recognizes. His centurions are a story of their own. He doesn't pick them for birth. He doesn't pick them for connections. One criterion: can the man hold the line? And can he make the men beside him hold it with him? Plutarch records what Marius told the ones who came pleading on behalf of their relatives. There's no need to ask me for a man who can't ask for himself with a sword. The patricians call the principle vulgar. The legionaries call it the only sensible one. Word of the new army spreads across Italy, and right alongside it, other word about the barbarians. Merchants coming back from Gaul tell the same story in every tavern. The Teutones are enormous, heads a full fist above the average Roman. They drink cold water straight out of mountain streams, and they don't know what fear is. They build no fortified camps. They sleep under open sky in any frost. Their women fight in the line beside the men, and when the horde falls back, those women kill the prisoners so they can't fall into Roman hands again. One merchant swears he watched a Teutonic warrior lift a bull by the horns with one hand. Rome listens. Rome believes. Because at Arausio, 80,000 dead is not an abstraction. Every man hearing that story has a father, a brother, or a neighbor who isn't alive anymore. So the Senate funds Marius's army. Money pours into weapons, into provisions, into shipbuilding to keep supply moving. The same aristocrats who call Marius a bore and an upstart throw open their strongboxes. They hate him. They pay him anyway, because the alternative is a Teutonic axe at the gate of their country villa. Marius takes the money. He spends it without a shred of sentiment, and he keeps preparing an army that by now isn't simply training anymore. It's turning into something else. It's turning into something else, and Marius understands that better than anyone in Rome. Recruits arrive at camp with a single possession: a knapsack, sandals, a knife. Sometimes not even that. The state issues the rest: helmet, cuirass, shield, gladius. 2 Pilum issues it and explains the price on the spot. This is not a gift. This is an advance, and you will earn it back in blood. Week 1, recruits learn to march. Not in formation. Marius doesn't waste an hour on parades. They learn to march loaded. 20 kilos of equipment, plus a mess kit, plus digging tools, plus stakes for the palisade, plus several days of grain. All told, a load that makes... The average man starts to stumble after an hour. Marius demands 20 miles a day, every day, with a full pack on your back. The legionaries start calling themselves Marius's Mules. At first, they say it with bitterness, then with a kind of grim pride. That's what happens with nicknames meant to humiliate you. Give them enough time, and they turn into a badge of honor. The baggage train is stripped to the bone. Marius cuts it without mercy. Carts hauling officers' personal belongings, gone. The market traders trailing the column, gone. The servants, wealthy soldiers dragged along for comfort, gone. Everyone carries his own load, which means the army moves faster, much faster. And it means something even more important than speed. The army stops depending on the road. It can march where no cart could ever follow. The veterans watch all this and can't believe it. This isn't how it's done. Marius answers in a single breath. At Arausio, they did it the old way. You know how that turned out. Nobody argues after that. Meanwhile, another kind of work is going on in the forges. Marius is redesigning the Pilum,
the heavy throwing spear, the legionary's main weapon before he closes in for the kill. The old Pilum, an iron head fastened to a wooden shaft by 2 iron pins. Reliable, proven, and you could pick it up off the ground and throw it straight back. That last part is exactly what Marius can't stand. So he swaps one of the iron pins for a wooden one. On impact, the wooden pin snaps from the shock.
The Pilum punches through the shield, the head bends downward, and the weapon breaks at the joint. The shield turns into dead weight. You can't lift it, and you can't pull the spear out. The enemy is forced to drop it and face the legionary's Gladius with nothing between them. The veterans look at the modified spear with open distrust. Plutarch doesn't record their exact words, but the logic isn't hard to follow. A weapon built to break looks like a broken weapon to a soldier. Marius explains the principle. Some of them understand, the rest will understand in battle. By the end of 103 BC, while the Horde is still circling through Gaul and Spain, Marius begins a construction project that baffles everyone around him. In the delta of the Rhone, where the shallows make navigation a nightmare, he orders thousands of soldiers to start digging. Not fortifications, a canal, the Fossa Mariana, a straight navigable channel running from the Rhone to the sea. The scale of it is enormous. Soldiers digging in the heat, knee-deep in mud, centurions standing over them. Back in Rome, the senators are curious. Why is the commander burning his army's time on construction work when the enemy hasn't even attacked yet? Marius doesn't explain. He finishes the canal, and once it's ready, supplying the army by sea no longer depends on the whims of the riverbed. Ships carrying grain, oil, and metal sail straight to the camp. The army gets a reliable supply line the barbarians cannot cut, because they don't know how to fight on water. This solves a problem Marius saw coming. A massive horde is terrifying when it's ravaging territory, but it cannot intercept the sea. The Senate looks at the finished canal and stays silent. It's not a military feat, it's not a triumph, it's engineering. And it's this ditch that will decide whether the army survives the following year. While the legionaries dig, the rumors keep spreading through Italy, and with every retelling, they pick up new details. The Teutones stand neck-deep in snow and don't shiver. The Cimbri melt ice with the heat of their bodies. They eat their meat raw. Their chieftains drink from the skulls of the consuls they've killed. This is not all of it is invention. Some of it is truth, stretched out of shape by fear. Germanic tribes really do handle cold in a way no man raised on the Mediterranean can match. They really do use the skulls of their enemies in ritual. Strabo mentions it the way you'd mention rainfall. A geographical fact, nothing to gasp at. But Rome takes every rumor and triples it. The taverns are thick with stories. Mothers use them to frighten their children into bed. The children pass them on to each other and add a few flourishes of their own. In the recruitment camps, those rumors do exactly what rumors do. A soldier who has never laid eyes on the enemy is already afraid of him. That's normal. Up to a point, it's even useful. Past that point, fear stops being fuel and turns into paralysis. Marius understands exactly where that line sits. So he doesn't ban the stories. He puts them to work instead. Every morning, before the march, before the digging, before the hours spent hacking at wooden stakes, he brings the men out to watch. Outside the camp, at a safe distance, small groups of Gallic and Germanic mercenaries walk past. Allies Marius hired for precisely this purpose. Tall, broad in the shoulder, loud. The legionaries stand there and look, and what they see is men. Big, strange, foreign, but men. Men who eat, sleep, swear, laugh. The fear doesn't vanish, it just stops being shapeless. It takes on an outline, and once a thing has an outline, you can handle it. One thing doesn't change through any of this preparation. The patricians paying for this army still hate Marius. They write letters to each other calling him a common soldier, a barbarian in a toga. They trade plans for stripping him of command the moment the victory is won, and handing the legions back to men of proper birth. Marius knows all about it. He reads enough to follow the politics, and he keeps building his army, not for the Senate, not for the Republic as it currently stands, but for the men who stand beside him in that camp every single day. Hold on to that detail. It doesn't go off yet, but it's ticking. By the spring of 102 BC, Marius's scouts come back with hard numbers. The Horde has split. The Cimbri are pushing through the eastern Alps. The Teutones and the Ambrones are coming along the coast, straight down the Rhone Valley, straight through the ground where the Roman camp sits. Something like 100,000 warriors, and behind them, the baggage train, wagons, families, livestock, an entire people on the move. Marius reads the report. He studies the map. Then he gives the order. Fortify the camp where the rivers meet. Palisade, ditch, earth rampart, a position that corks the only route south worth taking. The Horde is marching straight at that palisade, and it has no idea that this is where Marius intends to teach the first lesson. The Horde is marching straight at that palisade, and Marius is waiting for it with a shovel in his hands. Not a sword, a shovel. Get this part right, because it matters. A Roman commander is handed an army to fight barbarians, and the first thing he does is put his soldiers to digging. Not ambush trenches, not approaches to the enemy camp. A canal. Fortifications. Another canal. Centurions hand out picks and shovels as casually as they hand out gladii. In Marius's army, a legionary is a digger first and a fighter second. The veterans remember when it worked differently. Once, slaves and servants trailed behind the column and threw up the camp while the soldiers rested off the march. Marius killed that tradition with a single order.
Now every legionary, after 20 miles under a full pack, picks up a stake and starts driving the palisade. The hand that gripped a Pilum shaft an hour ago is holding a hammer. This isn't punishment, it's a system. A Roman army camp isn't somewhere you stop for the night. It's a fortress, raised every evening, taken apart every morning. A ditch as deep as a man is tall, an earthen rampart above it. A palisade of sharpened stakes, 4 gates, every one of them guarded. And inside, streets laid out to a single, unvarying plan. Here, the legionaries' tents. Here, the headquarters. Here, the supply depot. Here, the horse enclosure. Any soldier from any legion knows that plan by heart. He can find his own tent in pitch darkness because it always sits in the same place relative to the gate. An enemy who attacks a camp like this at night doesn't hit a sleeping column. He runs straight into a fortified city with the defenders already standing where they need to be.
Marius understands exactly what that's worth, so he makes camp building as compulsory a skill as handling a Gladius, which means the soldiers dig every single day, even when the enemy is still 3 weeks away, especially then. And while the spades are working, something else is going on. Training stakes are hammered into the ground all across the camp. Wooden posts the height of a man, standing in for the enemy. The legionaries go at them morning and evening. Not a chopping blow, a thrust. The Gladius is a short weapon, built for the crush of the formation. In a shield-to-shield clash, there's no room to swing. There's only room for one thing, a short, straight thrust up under the ribs. And it's drilled again and again and again, until the movement stops being a movement at all and turns into reflex. There's a centurion, Gaius Marius, a name later sources hand down as the model officer of the age, and he explains the principle to the recruits on his fingers. The man who chops opens up his flank. The man who thrusts from behind his shield stays covered. The first is beautiful. The second is alive. Choose. The recruits choose to live. They learn to thrust. Meanwhile, the forced marches go on, and nobody gets a discount. By the end of the summer of 102 BC, when the barbarian vanguard is already inside of the Roman watchposts, Marius's legionaries can cover 20 miles over broken ground, and then, straight off the march, throw up a fully fortified camp. No rest first, no complaints. At least, no complaints anyone can hear. This isn't heroism. It's the product of months of grinding, monotonous, punishing labor. The body has simply given up arguing with the load. It just does what's asked of it. And this is where an effect Marius counted on in advance starts to show. A soldier who has come through training like that looks at the enemy differently. Not because he's braver,
because he's so worn down that fear has less room left inside him. Exhaustion crowds out panic. It sounds like nonsense. It works. But there's one more piece of this training, and it doesn't fit the neat little formula of more drilling equals better soldiers. Marius sights the camp deliberately, so that from the walls you can see the barbarian army moving. Every day the legionaries watch the horde, hundreds of thousands of people, wagons, livestock. The stream never stops. It flows and flows as if it simply has no end. For the first 2 days, it does precisely what Marius expected. A few men slip away in the night. They're caught. The punishment is public, and it's hard, exactly as the regulations lay down. No execution, but severe enough that the rest draw their own conclusions. Then, on the 3rd day, something shifts. The men on the wall are looking at the same endless horde, and they start to count. Not in fear, with the cold curiosity of professionals. How many are there?
How are they drawn up? Where's the baggage train? Where's the cavalry? Marius sees. He doesn't announce the change. No speech, no order read out to the ranks. He simply keeps rotating the watch shifts as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, the modified Pilum gets its first real test against wooden shields, and the result matches the calculation down to the last detail. The point punches through the board. The wooden pin snaps. The spear hangs there in the shield at an angle, dragging the arm down. The man either drops the shield or lets it drag him with it. Either way, the next 3 seconds leave the shield bearer with nothing between him and a blade. And 3 seconds in close combat is an eternity. The veterans watching the test say nothing at all. Then one of them, his name didn't survive, says something like, "Clever." Coming from a Roman veteran who'd written the whole idea off as foolishness, that is the absolute ceiling of praise.
Marius orders the modified pila made for every legion. The blacksmiths work without a single day off. And here's the detail that's easy to miss. While the new heads are being forged, while the soldiers dig and march, while the scouts track the horde's movements, Marius is busy with something else entirely. He's studying the ground. Not maps, the ground itself, on foot. On horseback and on foot, he works his way around the hills northwest of his camp. He looks at the slopes. He checks where the forest grows thick enough to hide a detachment, where the incline is steep enough to burn the legs out of anyone attacking from below, where legions can be drawn up in several lines without blocking each other's path. And he finds it. A place near the small town of Aquae Sextiae. Hills, forest, a narrow valley between them, a river down below. Marius stares at that ground for a long time. Then he turns his horse and rides back to camp. He already knows where the battle will be fought. All that's left is to wait for the horde to come to him. He won't be waiting long. The barbarian vanguard, the Ambrones, are already pitching camp in the valley below. Their fires are visible from the Roman walls. At night, you can hear them. The Teutones have arrived at Aquae Sextiae, and the valley has become too cramped for 2 armies at once. Nobody is planning the first clash yet, but it is already inevitable. Nobody is planning the first clash yet, but Marius has already chosen his position. And now he does the one thing his soldiers cannot make sense of. He orders them not to attack. Day after day, the Horde files past the Roman camp. This isn't reconnaissance. It isn't a show of force. The Teutones are heading south, toward the Alps, toward Italy, toward the thing they've walked thousands of miles to reach. The Roman camp sits in their path like a stone in a river, and the river flows around the stone. The Horde flows around the camp.
Plutarch records it. The Teutones passed the fortifications for 6 consecutive days. There were so many of them that the column could not be seen from a single observation point. Warriors shouted up at the walls, demanding battle. They asked whether the Romans had any messages for their wives. They'd be in Rome soon enough. That's not just an insult. That's a pressure tactic, sharpened by barbarian tribes over generations. Humiliate the enemy. Pull him out of his fortifications and into the open field, enraged, unprepared, fighting on the attacker's terms. At the Trebia, that's exactly how Hannibal drew out Sempronius. At Lake Trasimene, Flaminius, a commander's fury, killed his own army before the enemy even raised a weapon. Marius knew that story. He had studied it. So he led his soldiers up to the walls, ordered them to watch, and forbade them to answer. It sounded simple. It was brutally, grindingly hard. Picture a legionary who had spent months training for one thing and one thing only: the fight. A man who could see the enemy a javelin's throw away, who could hear their taunts, who could hear the names of his own god spoken back to him in a sneer. And he stood there behind a wooden palisade with his hands to himself, for one reason only. His commander had told him to. A few of them cracked. Not desertion, that was something else entirely. They just yelled back. Threw stones, leaned out over the palisade. The centurions were on them instantly, hard, and with no explanation offered. An order was an order. By the 3rd day, you could feel the tension in that camp on your skin. The officers came to Marius. The conversation, Plutarch gives it to us only in broad strokes, but the meaning is obvious, was simple. The men were ready. The enemy was right there. So why wait? Marius answered with a question of his own. Ready for what, exactly? Ready to attack in open field, against an army 3 times their number, with barbarian cavalry around their flanks inside of minutes. Or ready to win? The officers said nothing. Marius explained, briefly, no words wasted. He wasn't waiting on the enemy's courage. He was waiting on their exhaustion. A horde on the move is not an army in battle array. It's hundreds of thousands of people hauling wagons, livestock, children, the old. They had been on the road for months. What they wanted was Italy, to reach it, strip it, and settle in warm country. What they did not want was to sit down and besiege a fortified camp. That's slow, expensive, tedious work. So they marched on past. And every day of marching was one more day without a proper camp, without steady supplies, without the discipline of the column, which a barbarian army never truly had in the first place. They began to string out. The vanguard pushed ahead, the rear guard lagged behind, and between them stretched miles of baggage train. Marius was waiting for one thing: the moment a wide enough gap opened between the pieces of that horde. Then he would strike. Not at the whole mass, at the segments he chose, on ground he had already scouted. The officers walked out of the tent. They understood the logic. Understanding it didn't make the waiting any easier. But discipline held. And up on the camp walls, the thing Marius was quietly turning into a psychological exercise went on. The soldiers watched the horde file past, and they got used to the sight. The fear that had knotted their stomachs on the first day had gone dull by the 4th. Nobody can hold maximum terror forever. The mind goes looking for its balance. Marius knew that, and he used it. On the 5th day, something telling happened. A knot of legionaries on the north wall started talking quietly among themselves. not a battle cry, not a string of curses, a practical analysis. That unit is drifting in too close. One volley of Pila and the losses would be colossal. And that cavalry is sitting too far off the infantry. You could open a breach right between them. Marius walked past. He heard it. He didn't stop, but he filed it away. His army had stopped being afraid and started thinking. That was exactly what he needed. On the 6th day, the tail of the Teuton column vanished around a bend in the valley. The camp let out its breath, not in relief, in readiness. Marius gave the men one night, normal sleep, normal food. Then he struck camp and led the army after the Horde, on a parallel route through the hills, where the barbarians expected no movement. The army moved fast, far faster than the barbarian column with its heavy, lumbering supply trains. Marius pushed on ahead. He seized the heights above Aquae Sextiae before the main Teutonic force could reach them.
The camp went up on the high ground, looking down over the valley. Palisade, ditch, rampart. The same work the soldiers had been doing every evening for months. By now, their hands knew the order of it without anyone needing to shout a command. Down below, in the valley by the river, the Ambrones, the vanguard of the Teutonic horde, made their own camp. They were one of the allied tribes, numbering several tens of thousands according to the sources, and they had arrived ahead of the main force. They were worn out from the march and were not expecting a fight. Marius stood on the hill and looked down at their camp. He could hear the noise rising from below, shouting, laughter, the crackle of campfires, the ordinary evening sound of a huge nomadic host settling in. In the morning, something would go wrong. Not according to Marius's plan, and certainly not according to the Ambrones. Sometimes, history takes the first step by itself.
Sometimes history takes the first step by itself, and that step is a bucket of water. Morning by the river did not begin with a trumpet blast or a centurion's order. It began with the Roman camp followers going down to fetch water. Slaves, non-combatants, mule drivers, all the people Marius could not quite do without, because the army needed water and someone had to carry it. They went down the slope with leather skins, unarmed, without guards. The sentries stayed up above, by the camp gates. At the river were the Ambrones. They had come for water too, or perhaps they simply happened to be there. Plutarch does not spell out the sequence, only the result. First came an argument, then pushing, then the first blood. Who struck the first blow is unknown. It did not matter. What mattered was this. The Ambrones had already finished their morning meal. They were armed. They outnumbered the Romans, and they decided the moment had come. Several non-combatants went down by the water. The rest ran uphill shouting. Marius heard the uproar. He did not know the details yet, but he saw his men fleeing from the river, and behind them a mass of armed barbarians surging upward. This was not a scouting probe. This was an attack neither side had planned. Marius had only seconds to choose. He could have shut the gates and waited. The hilltop position allowed it. The Ambrones would not have taken a fortified camp at once. They would have raged below, burned off their fury, and eventually pulled back without costing the legionaries a man. Instead, Marius threw the gates open and sent the Ligurian infantry allies, the troops positioned closest to the exit, down the slope. Not the legionaries, the Ligurians. And that was calculation too, not chance. The Ligurians were mountain men. They fought on broken ground as naturally as the Ambrones fought in open fields. The slope running down to the river was their kind of terrain. The Ligurians slammed into the front ranks of the Ambrones at the water's edge. The clash came where the bank dropped into the shallows. Men fought knee-deep in the river, in mud, on slick stones. There was no space for formation, no space for tactics, only bodies, shields, and short, savage thrusts at close range. The Ambrones were more numerous, but they had been pushing uphill along the bank, stretched out in a loose, disordered mob, each man eager to be the first to reach the fleeing servants. Their line had already come apart before they even touched a Ligurian shield. That was the first mistake, the one that started killing them. The Ligurians held tight, feet dug into the bank, shields working steadily, no wild hacking, no frenzied stabbing, just shield against shield, pushing. And a single step back into the river meant waist-deep water and no footing at all. The Ambrones began to go down. The shouting on the barbarian side changed its tone, and you could hear that change all the way up on the camp walls, where the legionaries stood watching the butchery below. That's the moment Marius made his second decision. He sent the legionaries down. Not all of them, a few cohorts. Enough to hold the bank, not enough to get bogged down in a full battle with the main body of the Horde, which hadn't arrived yet. It was a very fine line. Too few men and the Ligurians get crushed. Too many and Marius loses the initiative, pulled into a fight too early on terms that don't favor him. The cohorts came down fast, but not at a run. A legionary running downhill in full kit loses his formation. So they moved at a brisk pace, shields locked, in total silence. They reached the river and formed up behind the Ligurians, a second echelon. The Ambrones saw the reinforcements. Their front ranks were already shoving the Ligurians back on sheer numbers, on momentum and fury. But now, behind the Ligurians, stood an iron wall of shields. And from behind that wall came a sound, measured and terrifying. Legionaries beating the rims of their shields with their Gladii. Not a battle cry, a rhythm. Metal, steady, like the pulse of a machine. And it worked. Plutarch records the effect with the precision of an eyewitness. The front ranks of the Ambrones slowed. They didn't stop, they slowed. 3 seconds, no more. But in a battle, 3 seconds is exactly the moment when the momentum of an attack shatters. The Ligurians felt the pressure change and took a step forward. What came next went fast. In the shallows, the Ambrones were losing men in the front ranks. The short Ligurian swords did their work at a range the long barbarian blades couldn't reach without room for a swing. And the rear ranks kept pushing the front forward, with no idea of the slaughter happening ahead of them. The men in front fell and drowned, or the current simply swept them away. Panic in water spreads differently than panic on land. On land, you can run. In waist-deep water, you can only push, lose your balance, and drag the man beside you down with you. The Ambrones began to pull back. First single men, then groups, then a full-blown rout. The legionaries chased them to the bank and stopped. Marius gave no order for further pursuit. Again, a calculation. A chase breaks formation and pulls soldiers away from a fortified position. And the main Teuton force was still down in the valley. They'd heard the din of the fighting and they were already on the move. Marius recalled the cohorts to the heights. The dead stayed on the bank, Ambrones and a few Ligurians too. The river water ran red. This was the first blood at Aquae Sextiae, unplanned, accidental, and yet perfectly aligned with the logic Marius had been preparing all along. The vanguard of the Horde was broken on the bank and demoralized. The main forces were alarmed, but not yet organized, and Marius had his army back inside the camp before the Teutons could even assess the situation. Evening fell over the valley below. The noise grew, but it was a different kind of noise now, not battle cries, something else. It started the moment the sun went down, and it did not stop until dawn. The valley filled with howling. The whole valley filled with howling. And this sound was like nothing the legionaries had ever heard in their lives. It wasn't a battle cry. It wasn't singing. It wasn't weeping. It was something that lived on the threshold between all three. A long, low, many-throated drone that rose up out of the darkness, struck the rocky walls of the valley, and came back multiplied and warped. Then thousands of voices hit their shields at once. The rhythm would build, break off, and start over again. And then the women's voices came in, higher, more piercing, running on a different beat, laid straight over the men's until the two no longer fit, and the mismatch grated on your ears, physically, like something scraping bone. Up on the camp walls, the sentries stood in silence. No torches were lit. Marius had forbidden it. Darkness and silence out of the Roman camp, against darkness and chaos from below. Plutarch writes about this night in the flat, businesslike tone of a historian, describing a phenomenon that resists any simple explanation. He records that the barbarian women came right up to the edge of the camp and shouted toward the hills all night long. This wasn't an eyewitness getting carried away. It was a recorded fact, a mass ritual that came before a great battle among the Germanic tribes. Exactly what they shouted, the sources don't preserve, but the function needed no translation. It was the preparation of warriors for death. Germanic women traditionally served as seers. Tacitus would describe the very same thing a century and a half later as a stable, settled cultural practice. They prophesied before a battle, naming who would come back and who would not. They worked with the fear of death and turned it into rage, not soothing it, but setting it alight. That howling was not a sign of weakness. It was a weapon, and it was aimed inward at their own. In the Roman camp, the weapon was a different one: silence. Marius walked the perimeter of the walls. He looked at the sentries. He said nothing encouraging. He was never a man for speeches by the night campfires. He simply stopped beside each post for a few seconds, then moved on. That was his way of saying, "I am here. Everything is under control. Stand your ground." Below, the sound never let up. It shifted. The rhythm sped up, then slowed, then suddenly dropped away into complete silence for a few seconds. And that silence was worse than the howling, because inside it, a man could hear only his own breathing, and it felt as though something was about to happen. Then it would start again. Several legionaries asked their centurions for permission to light a fire. Not for warmth, the night was mild, but for light. The darkness and that sound together were hard to sit with alone. The centurions refused. An order was an order. One soldier, whose name history has lost, told the story afterward, and Plutarch passes the detail down to us. At some point during that night, it seemed to him that the camp walls were moving. Not literally. It was more that the darkness outside pulsed in time with the sound, and the boundary between the timber of the palisade and the void beyond it blurred and came apart. He hadn't slept in 2 days by then. That's an important clarification. By midnight, something happened in the barbarian camp that the sources describe cautiously. Mass hysteria, a term from a later age, but the phenomenon itself is ancient. When thousands of people hold themselves at the pitch of extreme agitation for hours on end, the system begins to fail. Several women, according to Plutarch, rushed with weapons to the edge of the camp, shouting that they had seen Roman lights. But there were no lights. The guards barely managed to stop them. And this detail matters not because it sounds dramatic, but because it tells us something crucial. On the night before a full-scale battle, part of the barbarian camp was no longer under anyone's control. The Teutonic leaders saw it too. They could not shut the ritual down. If they did, they would crush morale completely. They could not speed it up either. It obeyed its own rules now. All they could do was wait for dawn, then try to point all that gathered madness in the right direction. At daybreak, the howling stopped almost instantly, as if someone had cut it with a knife. In the silence that followed, birds could be heard. An ordinary morning, fog lying in the valley. Marius stood by the camp gates. He had not slept, and it was written all over his face. Plutarch says that in the days that followed, the commander looked like a man who had simply stopped wasting time on sleep, but his eyes were steady. He looked down into the fog. The night had done exactly what he expected, and exactly what the Teutonic leaders had failed to understand. The legionaries who had spent the whole night on the walls under that howling had survived it. They had not run. They had not cracked. They had not opened the gates. They had stood their ground in darkness and silence against a sound designed for one purpose: to break an enemy's will. And nothing had happened. It was a small victory, won without a single stroke of a sword, but in the mind, it mattered more than many battles. A person who has lived through the thing they feared becomes someone else. Not fearless, no, but someone who now knows that fear can be endured while the body stays where it is. Marius knew that. For months, he had been shaping the whole army toward that one realization. Now the night was behind them. The fog began to rise. Voices rang out in the barbarian camp, the voices of leaders, loud and demanding. The Horde was moving now, no longer chaotically as it had in the night, but with purpose. The Teutons were forming for battle. Their rage from that night had not cooled, it had hardened. The defeat of the Ambrones the day before, the sleepless night, the pressure that had built up over months of marching, all of it was now looking for a place to go. The Teutonic leaders stared at the hill where the Roman camp stood and saw only one barrier between themselves and Italy. They did not know that Marius had already given the order. That very night, while the valley was screaming, 3,000 legionaries under the command of Claudius Marcellus had slipped quietly out of the camp through the rear gates and vanished into the forest beyond the hills. They were waiting there now, in the dark, in silence. They were waiting there now, in the dark, in silence. And not a single man in the barbarian camp knew they existed. The evening before, as the first waves of howling were beginning to fill the valley, 3 lamps burned inside Marius's tent. A map of the ground lay spread across a wooden table, not drawn in ink, but scratched into a waxed board from personal reconnaissance. Hills, forest, a narrow southern exit from the valley, a river on the right. His officers stood around him. Marius spoke in short sentences. He did not try to inspire them. He did not promise victory. He explained the mechanics. The legions would take position on the hillside facing the valley. The enemy would have to attack uphill. That meant every step taken by the attacker would cost him twice the effort of the defender. The Pila would fly downward, their range lengthened by the slope. The barbarians would reach the front ranks already exhausted. Marius paused. He looked at each of the officers in turn, one by one. And then he said a name: Claudius Marcellus. Marcellus wasn't the oldest man in that tent. He wasn't the most famous one either. Marius had picked him for something else entirely. Months of campaigning side by side had convinced him of one thing. This man knew how to wait. He knew how to hold men still when the pressure was crushing them. And in a battle, that is worth more than personal bravery. Marcellus got 3,000 legionaries, the best, and by best, not the most fired up, the most disciplined. He would take them into the forest beyond the hills before first light, quietly, no torches, and there he would wait, as long as it took. The signal would be the trumpets from the main battle. The moment the Teutons were fully committed, throwing themselves at the slope, every eye and every blade fixed on what was in front of them, that was when Marcellus would hit them from behind. It wasn't a new trick. Marius had seen what it did at the Trebia, where a single Carthaginian detachment lying in ambush decided the whole outcome. He'd seen it at Trasimene. He had studied it from the very people Rome had lost to. Now he was going to use it himself. Marcellus was the first one out of the tent. Behind him, 3,000 men formed up at the rear gates of the camp in total darkness. Not a word spoken. There was only the movement of the centurion's hands, familiar gestures learned over months. The column entered the forest. Down in the valley, the howling had already started. The men still in camp heard that sound go muffled behind them as the trees swallowed it. An hour in, they could hear nothing but their own footsteps and their own breathing. The forest at night was another world. The darkness in there was dense, impenetrable. The only landmark a man had was the man directly in front of him, only that. So they moved slowly. They couldn't afford to fall. Metal would clatter. They couldn't talk. They couldn't cough. The centurions shut down any sound the instant it started. 3,000 men crossing a night forest as quietly as armed infantry can possibly move. They took up position behind the crest of the hill. They lay down. They waited. Dawn found them in the trees, listening to that distant howling from the valley, seeing nothing. While Marcellus was leading his detachment away, Marius made his final preparations. He changed the position of the camp gates. More precisely, he ordered the main gates, the ones facing the valley, blocked, and the side gates opened, which meant the legionaries would have to go out to battle in a different order than the one they were used to. Why? Because Marius did not want the army spilling into the valley immediately, all in one compact rush. He wanted it forming up on the slope calmly, in perfect order, while the barbarians down below were still only beginning to move. The side exit slowed the deployment just enough for it to happen as an organized maneuver, and not in the fervor of a straight sortie out the front. These are the details that usually don't make it into the historical descriptions of battles. And these are exactly the details that decide whether an army is still holding its ground an hour into the fight, or collapses in the first 20 minutes. Dawn arrived in the valley with a thick fog. Marius was already on his feet. He ate bread, olives, water without hurrying. A centurion saw that, and he understood. The commander believed there was time, and that was more reassuring than any speech. In the barbarian camp, the noise was growing. The Teuton leaders were gathering their warriors. After the night, after the defeat of the Umbri, after months of marching, the mood was a single thing: forward. Finish this hill and move on into Italy. Plutarch tells us the Teutonic leaders had promised their warriors one Roman woman each. Rome lay just beyond the Alps. Rome was rich, and Rome had killed their brothers by the river only yesterday. That was reason enough. The horde formed up in the valley. There were many of them, very many. From the hillside where the Roman camp stood, that was painfully clear. From above, scale reads differently than it does from the ground. A dark mass of men filled every foot of space between the river and the forest. Marius looks down at it. Then he turns to his trumpeters. The legions come out through the side gates and spread across the slope. No shouting, no hurry. Cohort after cohort slides into its place in the line. Shields locked, Pila up, feet set into the hillside, not tentatively, but deliberately, wide and firm. Every man feels the angle of the ground under his soles and finds his balance on it. Centurions walk the ranks. They straighten the line. If a man stands wrong, a shoulder shoves him back into place. All of it in silence. Below, the horde starts to move. Slowly at first, then faster, and they scream. A ragged, deafening roar climbs the hill and slams into the legionary shields like something solid, a wave you can feel. The ground begins to shake under the weight of thousands of steps. The legionaries don't move. Pila lowered, waiting for one word. Marius says nothing. He is counting steps from below, waiting for the right distance, the exact range where a throw down the slope will hit those front ranks with everything it has. The barbarians climb. Their breathing is already heavy from the ascent. Their strides get shorter, and still the fury in them refuses to let them slow down. Marius measures the gap. He looks at the trumpeter beside him. He nods. The trumpet cries out once, short, no repeat. Thousands of arms draw back in the same instant. The Pila go down the slope in one dense, plunging volley. Not man by man, rank after rank, 2 heartbeats apart. First volley, a pause. Second volley, down there, impact. There is no sound of victory, only a dull, collective thud, like hail striking roof tiles. Iron points punch through wood and leather shields. Shafts snap. Spears hang from the shields at an angle, dragging them down, making it impossible to raise an arm. The first rows stumble. The men behind keep pushing forward. They can't see the carnage ahead of them. A few seconds, and the attacking formation has lost its cohesion before it has touched a single Roman. This is precisely why Marius had redesigned the Pilum. Not to kill more men with the first volley, to break the formation before it ever reached the Roman line. A shield with a broken spear lodged in it is no longer a shield.
It's a burden, a hindrance, and there's no time to discard it. They are being crushed from behind, and the second volley is already overhead. The second volley lands on the same mass again, the dull thudding again, men stumbling in the front ranks. The ones who threw away their shields are struck in the body, with nothing left in front of them. And they are still falling when the third volley comes down. So the barbarians reach the first legionary line not as a unified charge, but in scattered groups. A few men here, a few there, arriving at different speeds, half their equipment gone. This was exactly what Marius had intended. The legionaries step forward, moving down the slope. Shields thrust forward and angled slightly down. The angle of the terrain dictates the technique. The Gladius just follows orders. A short, straight thrust. No swinging, no overhead blows. You put the point into whatever is open. The throat, the armpit, the belly under an arm raised to strike.
This has a name.
It's called work. Not a duel, not a clash of equals. Work. The centurion of the first cohort stands in the front rank. That's Marius's doctrine. The officer goes in front, never behind. He doesn't command with his voice. He commands with his body. Shield forward, step, thrust, step back, hold the line. Don't surge ahead in a frenzy. It's easy to die alone out in front of the formation. It's also unnecessary. The barbarians come in waves, not because it's a tactic, because physically there is no other way for them to come. The slope, the press of bodies behind them, the broken ground, the shattered shields. They claw their way uphill, carrying the fury they've been stacking up all night. And that fury is real. It kills. Several legionaries in the front rank go down. A long Germanic sword with a lucky swing can still find a way through the wall. But the line does not break. The wounded are replaced from the second rank immediately. No pause.
No gap long enough for anyone to use. This is where months of training pay off in a way a single word can't cover. A replacement in the line isn't just another man stepping into a slot. It's a maneuver performed in the crush of battle, without jostling your neighbors, without losing the formation, without opening a flank while the man on your right is fighting two opponents at once. It's a body that knows what to do without waiting for the mind. In battle, the mind is busy with other things. The barbarians can't do this, not because they're cowards, they aren't, but because nobody ever trained them this way. Their strength is the first charge, fury, speed, mass. If that charge fails to break the enemy, things turn grim fast. They weren't taught to hold formation under pressure. They were taught to win quickly or die heroically. Marius built an army that doesn't break on the first blow, or the second, or the third. By best estimate, roughly half an hour of fighting has passed. The first waves have broken against the slope. The barbarians are reforming, not through organization, but by instinct, feeling along the line for something soft. The right flank of the legion sits closer to the river, where the slope is gentler. A large group is sent that way. Marius watches it from his command post. He doesn't panic. He anticipated this move already. A cohort with a reinforced left shoulder is stationed there for exactly this, to take a charge coming off the flatter ground. The group reaches the right flank and slams into it with greater speed, helped along by the terrain. Under that weight, the first two ranks give a step. One step. The centurion shouts. It's the only vocal command heard in the entire engagement. The third rank holds firm. The retreat stops. The pressure equalizes. The sun keeps climbing. August in southern Gaul brings the kind of heat that starts early and never relents. The barbarians have been attacking for over an hour. They've climbed uphill. They've fought at arm's length. They've taken losses in the front ranks and been shoved forward from behind. Their breathing has changed. You can hear it in the short gaps between the shouts. The legionaries are tired too, but they're still standing their ground. The barbarians, however, are in constant motion, up, back, and up again. That's the whole difference between holding a slope and clawing your way up one, and it's a factor Marius had counted on from the very first moment. The center of the barbarian formation begins to slacken, not retreating, just slowing. A subtle shift and a vital one. The attack loses its single unified momentum and breaks apart into a scatter of separate little fights strung out across the hillside. Gaps open between the clumps of attackers, and in those gaps, there's space. Space that simply did not exist when the battle began. The front ranks of the legionaries feel the pressure change against their shields, and they start to edge forward. Slowly, not punching through, just filling the holes as they appear. Down in the valley, the main mass of the Horde is still pushing toward the slope. They can see their comrades up ahead. They see the fighting, the smoke drifting off the campfires, the movement. What they don't see is that their own vanguard is already running out of breath. So they keep marching, which means the rear of the attack is sealed shut by everyone piling in behind. No way back, only up. Marius waits. Longer. He's waiting for the exact moment the main mass of the Horde is fully drawn into that narrow ground between the slope and the river. The moment when there's no retreat in front and no retreat behind, only the crush. The trumpeter stands ready at his shoulder. Marius looks out over the valley. He counts. He counts again. He watches the valley. He waits. And then he nods to the trumpeter a second time. The trumpet cries out, different this time, longer, higher. That signal isn't for the legionaries on the slope. It's for the men nobody can see. In the woods beyond the hills, Marcellus hears it. He's been lying in the brush for hours with his 3,000 men. Their arms and legs have gone dead. A few had drifted off to sleep, only to be jabbed awake by a centurion's silent hand. Lying motionless while a battle roars somewhere in the distance is its own particular kind of trial, and there's no training on earth that fully prepares a man for it. The body screams to move. Marcellus held them in place through his presence alone, walking the line, stopping, looking each man in the face without saying a word. That was enough. Now, the trumpet. Marcellus rises first. Behind him, 3,000 men come up off the ground at the same instant, like one single mechanism. No shouting, no running start. They simply rise and they move. A quick walk at first through the trees. Then, as the woods thin out, they break into a run and burst out of the tree line straight into the rear of the barbarian horde. What happens in the next few seconds can be summed up in one word: a pause. Short, almost too brief to notice. The rear ranks of the Horde hear the thudding of feet behind them. They turn. They see 3,000 shields coming out of the woods at a dead sprint, and they understand. Not instantly, not all at once, but in a wave rolling from the back of the column to the front, exactly what has just happened to them. They're trapped. Marcellus doesn't give that realization time to harden into anything like organized resistance. His cohorts smash into the rear of the Horde before the ranks can even turn to face them. The blow lands on the backs of men still looking forward, still staring up the slope at Marius's legionaries. Pila fly into that packed mass from 10 paces. You couldn't miss if you tried. Up on the slope, Marius feels the moment the pressure on his front ranks changes. It doesn't disappear, it shifts. The barbarians in front are still fighting, but the ranks behind them have stopped pushing forward. They're turning, shoving, shouting. Panic at the tail of the column travels toward the front faster than any messenger could run. Marius gives a third nod to the trumpeter. On the slope, the legionaries stop holding and start moving. The line takes one step down, then another. Slowly. The formation never loses its shape. Nobody breaks ranks, but now the pressure is coming from above, driving downward, pressing them into the ground, and the barbarians realize what has happened to them. They are caught between two walls of stone, the legionaries above, Marcellus behind, and the space between those walls is shrinking with every passing second. The Horde's formation breaks, not all at once, in several places at the same time. Wherever the squeeze from two sides becomes unbearable, the men at those points stop attacking and start looking for a way out. And there is only one way out, to the right, toward the river. They run for the water. This is not an organized retreat. This is a rout, and it sweeps up everyone in its path like an avalanche. One man runs, his neighbor sees his back and turns as well. Within a minute, hundreds are fleeing. Within 3, thousands. The legionaries do not pursue chaotically. Marius holds the formation on the slope until the last possible moment, until the gap is wide enough. Then the command comes, and the cohorts shift into an organized pursuit. They do not run haphazardly. They advance in ranks, herding the fleeing men toward the river, denying them any chance to regroup. The river is not deep, but the bank is steep. Panicked men leap into the water, and bronze breastplates and iron helmets take them straight to the bottom.
The ones who can swim reach the far bank and find legionnaires waiting for them there. The men Marius had sent across a ford upstream hours earlier. Plutarch writes of the Arc, the river that ran red that day. Part of the Horde does not run for the river. They fall back toward the barbarian camp. A massive wagon fortress, hundreds of carts drawn up in a circle at the edge of the valley. Their families are there, their children, the women who wailed into the darkness all night long. And now those women watch their men come running back, beaten. The legionnaires enter the wagon fortress through the gaps between the carts. Inside there is chaos. Children, livestock, wagons loaded with everything plundered over months across Gaul. And the women. Plutarch describes what happens inside that wagon fortress without softening a single blow. The Germanic women do not surrender. They strike at the legionnaires with battle axes and sickles.
Some kill their own children before the legionaries can reach them. Not all, but many. The sources record this as fact, without comment. Marius left no account of this part of the battle. Plutarch neither condemns nor justifies. He simply reports what happened. This is the War of 102 BC, unedited. The wagon fortress is cleared by midday. The sun stands at its zenith. The heat is so brutal that the wounded on the slope lose consciousness, not from their wounds, but from thirst. Marius orders that water be brought to them first. The valley is filled with what is left of the Horde. The ones still running are caught. The ones hiding are found. The ones who surrender are bound and led aside. There are many, very many. And this, too, is part of Marius's calculation. Because a living barbarian in the slave market is worth a fortune. The Teutonic king Teutobod tries to slip away through the hills with a small detachment. He is taken the next day. He is an enormous man. Plutarch writes that Teutobod was so tall, the Romans later put him on public display as a curiosity. Now he walks with his hands bound. By evening, the battle is over. Marius rides across the field. Not in a triumphant pose, he just watches. He counts. He tallies the losses. Legionary casualties are real, and they're serious, but set them beside the slaughter down in the valley, and there's no comparison. The horde that came to erase Rome has stopped existing as a fighting force in a single day. A few hours of work between sunrise and noon. Marius reins in his horse on the crest of the hill. Below him lies the valley he picked out weeks ago. The hills, the forest, the river, every piece of it sitting exactly where he calculated it would sit. This wasn't luck, and it wasn't a gift from the gods. This was engineering. The canal, the camp, the reworked spear, the detachment waiting in ambush, the position on the slope, every element dropped into place. But one question is still hanging there. The Cimbri, the second and larger half of the horde, are marching through the eastern Alps right now. They don't know yet what happened here. They will, and when they do, it either breaks them or doubles their fury. Marius takes off his helmet. He looks north, toward the direction the Cimbri will come from. The Republic survived today. The war is not over. The Republic survived today, and Rome starts claiming the victory as its own almost immediately. Riders are galloping south before the valley below Aquae Sextiae has even cooled. The news outruns every supply train on the road. The Teutones are beaten. Their king is taken. The threat from the west is gone. In Rome, they receive it the way a city receives the lifting of a siege. First silence, then a roar, then tears that nobody bothers to hide in the streets. The Senate votes 15 days of thanksgiving to the gods, a record length for a ritual like that. The temples overflow. The priests work without a break. Marius's name is in every mouth. The same senators who a year ago were writing letters sneering at a soldier with no Greek education are now standing up to deliver speeches about the great general, the savior of the fatherland. Plutarch doesn't name them. He simply sets down the fact with a coldness that lands harder than any sarcasm. Marius, meanwhile, is standing on the field at Aquae Sextiae, doing the job of a Roman general. After a victory, you sacrifice to the gods. Captured weapons are heaped up in front of the altar, mountains of iron, shields, swords, spears. That's the tradition. It isn't optional. Marius performs the rite precisely and without hurrying. Then he sets the pile alight. The flames climb high. The metal doesn't burn, but the wood of the hafts and shafts does, and the leather straps and the wooden shields. The smoke is visible for miles. The legionaries stand around it and watch. Some of them see something beautiful in the fire. Marius sees logistics. Captured weapons you don't burn are weapons you have to guard, transport, and inventory. Burning them is far simpler. But not all of it goes into the flames. Marius holds a portion back for another purpose. The surviving barbarians, thousands of them, bound, sitting under guard along the edge of the valley, watch the smoke go up. Men still able to carry a weapon, women taken alive, children, the old. Everything that's left of the horde that came to destroy Rome. Marius walks the length of those rows. He looks at the prisoners with exactly the same expression he wore studying the map of the ground before the battle. This is live cargo. It's worth money, a great deal of money. The slave traders are already on the road from Massalia, the nearest Greek trading city. They heard about the victory before the blood in the river Arc had dried. They have an excellent network of informants.
The prisoners go to the slave markets, Rome, Sicily, Greece. Officially, that money flows into the state treasury. Unofficially, it fattens the purses of the commanders who can quietly hold back a portion of the living merchandise and wait for a better price. This machine isn't new. Marius didn't invent it. He simply ended up in a position where it started running on an industrial scale. The very patricians who financed the army out of sheer terror of barbarian axes will now collect the return on their investment in the form of labor for their estates. The senators who despised Marius are about to grow rich off his victory. That isn't the irony of history, that's just its usual order. Teutobod, king of the Teutones, captured the day after the battle, will walk in the triumphal procession,
Rome will see him in a few months when Marius comes back to the city. A giant of a man in chains, put on display as proof of the general's greatness.
Plutarch writes that Teutones stood so tall he loomed above the captured shields hung on the triumphal arch. Rome watches, Rome applauds. Marius accepts the triumph. He has every right to it. Nobody disputes that, not even the men who hate him. But the senators clapping up in the stands are already thinking about the next step. The Cimbri are crushed a year later by his colleague Catullus at Vercelli. The threat is gone completely. Rome is saved, which means Marius is no longer needed, not to the extent he once was. They'll begin working against him immediately. That too is the usual order of things. But here, history takes a turn that perhaps neither the senators nor Marius himself fully calculated. The reformed army has come home to Rome. The legionaries who slogged through the swamps of Gaul, who spent their nights on the walls with barbarian howling in the dark, who held the slope at Aquae Sextiae. These men have changed, not in a sentimental sense, in a very concrete one. They fought for Marius, not for the Senate, not for the Republic as some abstraction, not for land because most of them never owned a scrap of it. They fought for one specific man, the man who fed them, trained them, fortified their camp every single evening, and refused to throw them into battle before the moment was right. The old army fought for the land it defended and went back to that land when its service was done. The new army comes back to Marius because there is nowhere else to go. Proletarians without property have no fields waiting for them at home. All they have is a commander who promised them pay and plunder. Marius understands this. He didn't create that dependency on purpose. He created an army that could fight. The dependency arrived as a side effect. Sulla, a young officer who served under Marius in the African campaign, is watching all of it very closely. 20 years from now, he'll draw his own conclusions and apply them with a harshness that makes civil war inevitable. Then Caesar will do the same, with the same kind of men, following the same blueprint. Marius opened a door, perhaps without fully understanding what lay on the other side. Or perhaps he understood exactly and opened it anyway because there were no other options. 80,000 dead legionnaires at Arausio had shut every other door. The choice was simple: reform the army and save the Republic, or preserve the laws of the Republic and lose the war. Marius chose victory. He broke the laws of the Republic the moment he was elected consul 6 times in a row, straight past every norm there was. The army became loyal to the general, not to the state. The die wasn't cast at the Rubicon. It was cast here, in the valley below Aquae Sextiae, in 102 BC, the moment the engineer in a general's cloak solved Rome's survival problem the only way it could be solved. Rome survived.
The Republic was saved. And it was that salvation, carried out in exactly this way, by this man, with this army, that set the mechanism turning. The mechanism that 80 years later would produce Augustus, one ruler, and leave Republican institutions standing as pure decoration. The valley below Aquae Sextiae is overgrown now. The bones in the soil have become the soil. Teutones died in captivity. Nobody knows the date. Plutarch didn't think it was worth writing down. Marius died in 86 BC, right at the opening of the civil war he had helped set in motion himself. Plutarch tells us that in his final days he raved, convinced he was leading an army once again.
Maybe there was a strange accuracy in that delirium. So stand in the ruins of their laws and ask yourself this: if you had been sitting in the Senate in 104 BC, knowing everything that was coming, would you have handed the army to Marius? Or would you rather have met the Teutones with every law perfectly observed? History doesn't offer you a right answer.